financially. Next thing I wanted to get to, and we can start with you, Vish, for this topic, and then get to Blake. Looking at the two teams that we're all huge fans of, right? The Packers, the 49ers, they're the class of the NFC right now. So do you think as their rosters are currently constructed that these are Super Bowl contending type teams?
Yeah, I think they are Super Bowl contending teams, but I think both teams have clear impediments that put them more on the outside looking in. If you had to ask me the four biggest Super Bowl contenders right now in the NFL, I would go with the Browns, the Bills, the Buccaneers, and the Chiefs. To me, those are the four best teams in the NFL. Those are the four most complete teams and I think the two most complete teams are the Bucs and the Browns. And then the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs have these two amazing quarterbacks who really can overcome a lot. I would say the Packers fall in the same boat, but I think they have a couple more holes in their roster, namely their interior defensive line and and the lack of speed at linebacker. This is something we've discussed ad nauseum, and it continues to be an issue. I still think there's a lack of an explosive element on the Packers offense. I think that they're too reliant on Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers' offensive execution. I think Aaron Jones is the only explosive player on their offense. I wish they had a number two receiver that could take the top off of the defense. I think Amari Rodgers is just another in between the numbers. He is more explosive than I give him credit for, but I kind of like him to like a Sterling Shepard, maybe a better version of that coming out of college, a Randall Cobb type. I wish the Packers had a pure speed guy, a guy that can score an 80-yard touchdown where you go hard play action and you can go bombs away because Rodgers can still get it out there. So those are the things I think they're missing, and I think those things would hurt them when they play a team like the Buccaneers. As we saw, it had to be a little perfect, and the Buccaneers corners got a little grabby, and the Packers offense struggled to execute because guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Equanimeous St. Brown cannot beat true man coverage consistently enough for them. So that's one thing. And then when it comes to the Niners, I still think there's big question marks at corner depth, and I still think that their edge rushing depth in general is a big question mark. I think they're still so overly reliant on Nick Bosa and Nick Bosa's production. I like Samson Ebukam. He is not a natural or a true pass rusher, and he cannot even be relied upon, in my opinion, for Kerry Hyder production if Nick Bosa goes down. Dee Ford, obviously fantastic player when he's healthy, still a question mark. So I think there's some question marks there with the Niners. And then with the Niners, the other thing is the number 3 receiver is still a question mark. And I still question the entire drop back passing game of the 49ers. I still don't think they're a team that's built to drop back. I look at their personnel. They don't have the receivers to me to drop back. Their offensive line, while it's improved, I still think Laken Tomlinson and Mike McGlinchey are not the pass blockers that you can drop back 35, 40 times a game. They're still very good players in their own right. They're good at certain things. True drop back pass protection is not something they truly excel at. And then finally, Jimmy Garoppolo has shown that when it comes to the drop back pass game and that when he's asked to do that away from play action, that is something he has not done well as a 49er. And Trey Lance, this is something he didn't do in college. He wasn't a true drop back pass quarterback in college. So while that's a skill set he could possibly develop, and you see glimpses of his ability to process information, make quick, decisive reads based on safety rotations, and you see his ability to do, and you see the arm strength to make throws at every level. It's just something you don't get to see consistently. So to have an expectation for him to do that next year would be so totally unfair. So from that standpoint, I think both teams have enough talent to definitely compete and be teams that would be right there in the conversation and definitely make the playoffs. But I think there are giant question marks that need to be answered before we can say that these are amongst the 4 aforementioned teams that I named, who I believe are the true 4 Super Bowl favorites.
Yeah, I'm with Vish on the top 4 teams. I think you mentioned Browns, Chiefs, Bills, and Buccaneers. I'm right there with you. I think those rosters and the combination of rosters and like not having many weaknesses, along with all those teams, have some great quarterback play, and then others who I'd say really good, like the Browns. I don't think Baker's as good as those other guys, but he's still more than capable, and the roster's maybe a little better. So I think those rosters are clearly a notch or 2 above, say, even the Packers. And, the Packers made the NFC Championship game the last two years, and that's still with, I think Vish hit it perfectly, the big holes they have. The consistent number 2 receiver, the interior D-line still not having really much talent besides Kenny Clark. The linebackers, they've neglected since, I want to say, Desmond Bishop, probably, depending on how you think of Blake Martinez. And although they did I really like their draft, and I think they filled up some holes. Like, their O-line still has questions. Bakhtiari is coming back from injury. They lost Lindsley. If Elton Jenkins or Billy Turner gets injured, that would be a major loss. And that's the thing that I have with the Packers and the Niners, is that if they have a couple injuries to a few key positions, like, their season is out the window. Now, last year the Niners had key injuries to, I think you could say, every single position besides kicker, maybe punter and long snapper. And I wouldn't be surprised if those guys were on the injury report a couple weeks. But the thing here is that if the Packers have, say, Rodgers go down, or the Niners have one or two of their secondary guys go down, I'd be very concerned with the lack of depth at those positions. And, you could probably say that for every team, but with teams that have championship aspirations, I think depth is really, really going to be important, especially with an added game this year that, is just going to add more wear and tear to the bodies. So we'll see. I think Packers will make the playoffs. I'm not too concerned with the division. It seems like LaFleur's done a good job as a coach there, and obviously Rodgers is Rodgers against these teams, but it's going to be improved. And then for the Niners, I don't know about their quarterback play yet. We still don't know what Trey Lance is going to be, and that's just too big of an unknown. I think they can make the playoffs, but I think the NFC West is probably the toughest division in all of the NFL. Like, I could see any of those teams being first and any of those teams being last. And it's hard to say that about many other divisions. I'd say the next closest would maybe be like the AFC North, because I like all those teams a lot. But the NFC West could legitimately have 3 playoff teams, and it could be any 3 of them, and I wouldn't be surprised with whoever made it.
I think for me, just starting with the Packers, I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. I'm not going to hide that. He's my favorite quarterback, maybe ever. So I think any year Aaron Rodgers is on your team, especially coming off an MVP year, you're going to be in the playoffs. You're going to be competitive. You're going to have a chance to compete with the best of the NFC. And I think if you're looking at, and we'll get to this topic a little later with the NFC, but if you just look at the NFC top to bottom, the Buccaneers are great, but then beyond that, I think there's a real question of who those next 2 to 5 to 6 teams are, right? And the Packers, to me, while I don't think their roster is going to wow you between all those teams, they don't really stand apart in any sort of way like that. And like you greatly pointed out, Vish and Blake, they do have holes in the roster. They have issues where if they get one injury here or there, could be a season-ending type of thing for the team. So I think with the Packers, it's really dependent on Aaron Rodgers, how this team is humming this year, and their depth, and whether or not they have injuries to their depth. I mean, you guys nailed this topic, really. But for the 49ers specifically, the one thing I'm looking at, and Vish, you mentioned it, and I almost started going off while you were talking about it, but I had to hold myself back. If Jason Verrett gets hurt, season over for the 49ers. I don't really know what else to tell 49ers fans, because their starting corner will be Emmanuel Mosley, and then they'll have to decide between Ambry Thomas and Deontay Johnson and all these other guys who you just don't want to put in that kind of position. So to me, when I look up and down the Niners roster, I think Blake put it perfectly that they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think they'll definitely be very competitive in that sense. But if I'm looking at the Super Bowl window for this team, I would say it's about the next 2 to 4 years, not this upcoming year, right? I think with Trey Lance, I want to see him play as soon as possible and be successful early on. And I think if he can get a playoff game under his belt in his rookie year, to me, that would be super important for his development as a quarterback and being successful in the NFL with the 49ers. So I don't think either of these teams are going to win the Super Bowl this year, but I think, like you guys perfectly pointed out, they're in that tier of teams who should be competing for the NFC Championship games, the wild card, divisional round type stuff, to where you could see the Niners winning a game or two in the playoffs. You could see the Packers getting to the NFC Championship game, but I don't think any of us are predicting them to go to the Super Bowl.